Imagine the most powerful sports organization on earth walks into your city and offers you a dream: the World Cup, millions of visitors, global attention, economic growth, international prestige. For decades, cities around the world accepted that offer with almost no hesitation, because when FIFA called, governments listened, local leaders signed, rules were adjusted, costs were accepted, and FIFA got almost everything it wanted. But something unexpected happened on the road to World Cup 2026. For the first time in years, cities started pushing back. Lawyers challenged FIFA's demands. Politicians questioned the costs, organizers refused to accept certain conditions, and suddenly, football's most powerful organization found itself facing a problem it rarely encounters: resistance. The story of the 2026 World Cup is not just happening inside stadiums, it's happening inside city halls, government offices, and legal departments. And what is happening there could change the future of the World Cup itself. To understand why cities are pushing back, you first need to understand how FIFA built its power. For decades, FIFA operated from a position of enormous leverage. The World Cup is the most valuable event in football and one of the most valuable events in global sports. Cities competed against one another for the right to host it. That competition gave FIFA extraordinary negotiating power. If one city rejected a demand, another city would usually accept it. If one government hesitated, another government stepped forward. The World Cup was considered too valuable to lose. That dynamic shaped the relationship between FIFA and host cities for generations. Contracts became larger, requirements became more extensive, expectations increased, and because host cities desperately wanted the tournament, resistance remained relatively rare. FIFA became accustomed to setting terms rather than negotiating them. The organization wasn't behaving illegally, it was simply operating within a system that consistently rewarded its position. But systems can change, and by the time preparations for World Cup 2026 began, the environment looked very different from the one FIFA had dominated for decades. And then something happened FIFA wasn't expecting. Toronto and Vancouver became two of the most important battlegrounds in this story. As preparations accelerated, local officials began reviewing requirements attached to hosting the tournament. Some requests immediately raised concerns, not because city leaders opposed football, not because they opposed the World Cup, but because certain conditions collided with local political realities, legal frameworks, and public expectations. Instead of quietly accepting every request, municipal governments began asking difficult questions. Could these terms actually be implemented? Were taxpayers receiving enough value in return? Should local priorities be adjusted to accommodate an international sports organization? Those questions may sound ordinary, but inside FIFA's traditional operating model, they represented something: significant pushback, negotiation, resistance, and unlike many previous cases, some cities possessed enough leverage to force changes. Slowly, FIFA adjusted, not completely, not dramatically, but enough to demonstrate something important. FIFA could be pressured, FIFA could compromise, and that realization sent a message far beyond Canada. But then attention shifted to money. Every World Cup generates enormous revenue: television rights, sponsorship agreements, licensing deals, hospitality packages, ticket sales, and the financial scale is staggering. Yet, behind the headlines celebrating economic opportunity lies a more complicated reality. Hosting a tournament also costs money: security, transportation, emergency services, infrastructure upgrades, planning teams, public resources. Local governments often carry substantial portions of those responsibilities. That doesn't automatically make the arrangement unfair. Many cities believe the long-term benefits justify the investment. The challenge emerges when expectations and outcomes begin diverging. Suddenly, officials start examining spreadsheets more closely, citizens ask harder questions, local media investigate spending decisions, and political leaders face pressure to justify commitments made years earlier. This is where World Cup 2026 has become especially interesting. The debate is no longer simply about football, it's about risk: who absorbs it, who profits from it, and whether the balance remains acceptable. And this is where the story becomes bigger than 2026. Chicago stepped away, Pittsburgh stepped away, multiple cities withdrew from bidding processes, others publicly expressed frustration behind closed doors, and sometimes in public. None of these examples alone threaten FIFA. The World Cup will continue attracting hosts, cities still want the tournament, governments still recognize its prestige, but together they reveal something larger: The era of automatic acceptance may be fading. Future host cities have more information than previous generations. They can study budgets, analyze contracts, compare outcomes, learn from the experiences of others. That knowledge changes negotiations. FIFA remains enormously powerful, yet power works best when nobody challenges it. Once challenges become common, every negotiation becomes more complicated. But what makes this story truly unusual is that it isn't happening in just one city. For years, FIFA's negotiating model depended on a simple assumption: there would always be another city willing to say yes. If one government hesitated, another would step forward. If one mayor complained about costs, another mayor would focus on the prestige. The World Cup was viewed as an opportunity too valuable to reject. But, leading into 2026, warning signs have started appearing across multiple countries. Some cities withdrew from bidding processes entirely. Others openly questioned the financial assumptions behind hosting major tournaments. Local officials, who once viewed FIFA as an unquestionable partner, have become far more cautious. They are studying previous tournaments. They are examining public spending reports. They are analyzing whether promised economic benefits actually materialized. This does not mean cities no longer want the World Cup. They clearly do. What it means is that host cities are becoming more sophisticated negotiators. They are asking questions that previous generations often avoided. How much risk are taxpayers assuming? What happens if visitor projections are missed? Who pays when costs exceed forecasts? And perhaps most importantly, what happens after FIFA leaves? Because while FIFA moves on to the next tournament, local governments remain responsible for the long-term consequences. That growing awareness may become one of the most significant changes in international sports governance over the next decade. And this is where everything starts to change. The real story is not whether FIFA won or lost a particular negotiation. The real story is leverage. For decades, FIFA held most of it. Cities competed for the right to host. Governments adjusted regulations. Public resources were mobilized. The balance of power was clear. But leverage is not permanent. It shifts when circumstances change. The modern political environment is very different from the one that existed 20 years ago. Taxpayer scrutiny is greater. Public spending faces more oversight. Local media investigates large projects more aggressively. Citizens demand transparency. Social media allows controversial agreements to become public discussions almost instantly. In that environment, organizations that once operated with near total negotiating power face a new reality. Every demand is questioned, every concession is debated, every contract is examined. FIFA remains one of the most powerful institutions in global sport. No serious observer would argue otherwise. Yet the events leading up to the 2026 World Cup suggest that power is becoming more contested than before. Toronto and Vancouver may not have transformed FIFA overnight, but they demonstrated something important. Host cities are not as powerless as they once believed, and once that lesson spreads, future negotiations may look very different. The World Cup of 2030 and 2034 could be shaped as much by lawyers and city planners as by football executives, not because cities want to stop hosting tournaments, but because they increasingly want a larger voice in how those tournaments are organized. And that may be the biggest story of all. The football itself will be spectacular. The stadiums will fill. The world's best players will compete. Fans will celebrate unforgettable moments. None of that changes. But long after the final whistle of the 2026 World Cup, another conversation will continue. It will take place inside government offices, city councils, and planning departments around the world. Officials will study what happened in Toronto. They will examine Vancouver. They will compare costs, benefits, and outcomes. They will ask whether the traditional relationship between FIFA and host cities still makes sense. And FIFA will face a decision of its own: adapt to a world where cities negotiate harder or continue relying on a model designed for a different era, because the most important battle surrounding World Cup 2026 may never happen on a football pitch. It may happen across negotiating tables. And for the first time in a very long time, FIFA is discovering that the other side has started fighting back.